basically, this is what it looks like. Thanks, Geeks for Geeks, for making a really, really nice to look at thing. So this is what it looks like whenever you're doing a basic SQL injection. The attacker here is submitting that lovely payload up there, which is just selecting username and passwords from the user's table, and then they use the comment right after it, and then this is the full payload that happens. And so it's like, yes, let me go select the name, and then boom, in the middle of that, gifs equals union select username password. So then it returns all the passwords, all the union names, back to the thing. We'll look at this more practically in a couple seconds here, but just so you kind of understand what it looks like before we do the thing. So let's talk about SQL Map. SQL Map is awesome. It detects probably about 90% of the cases that exist on the open internet right now. We run into very, very specific use cases where SQL Map does not work. So, sorry, I'm getting the labs up. Let's start building while I'm cool. Sorry about that. There we go. Spinning up the labs now, so that way it doesn't take a second. Basically, there are very niche use cases where SQL Map won't work. A couple of those are majorly whenever, I hate to say when developers really mess it up, but when developers really mess it up. So sometimes, this is not uncommon. These are things that have been found on engagements that I've recreated, or at least one of them I have. There's SQL queries across multiple comments. So say you find like 7 SQL injectable fields, but they're all limited to being, you can only input 10 characters into each field. SQL Map by default, because it has all of its super duper like high level ones that input like 50 to 70 characters per payload, it won't be able to detect something like that. So for that, you'd have to resort to manual injection and use the multi-line comments we were talking about earlier, the dash asterisk, and then go from there. And so that's one instance of where SQL Map won't really be able to detect it heuristically, just because it can't, there's no error messages being output. You have to be able to do something manually. You know it's all there. But the other one that is also common is for some reason, developers like to run the SQL query 2 times. And so if you run into a scenario where it's a time-based injection, and you're like, okay, cool, I'm uploading this, it's sleeping for 10 seconds instead of sleeping for 5 seconds. You know what I mean? So that'll be something where SQL Map, whenever it sends sleep parentheses 5, which just basically makes the web app not respond for 5 seconds, it's looking for a response time in 5 seconds. If it runs twice, it doesn't get that. It gets it in 10 seconds. So, excuse me. Let's look at an example of it. So I'm going to quickly, hopefully this won't break the world. So, let's see if I can just drag this over. Can I please? Yeah. All right. So we'll get into a little bit of what this exactly is. But I did make labs for SQL injection and just kind of as like a learning tool. So I don't know if you're a junior in this field or if you're trying to break into cyber and you want to have a little bit more visibility on what SQL injection may look like. These labs are something that I've used, that I've made with learning materials I have, that I've been given. And so I was like, all right, cool, let me make this in the most digestible way. So we'll get into what the other 2 labs cover right now, but for now, we're just going to take a look at this time-based injection, just so I can show you guys, like, yes, it is vulnerable, but it is, SQL Map will not detect it. So again, all these labs are lovely and open source. I love that this screen is right here. I can just see it and not have to look over my shoulder. So if we come over here and we aside, no, go to the side of this screen, please. Okay, we're just going to do that for a second. And then we bring over a new terminal. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're just going to try and run SQL Map on this. Now, this is an intentionally vulnerable database. Can you guys see that okay? Hopefully. Yeah, okay. So I'm going to be running the Python version of SQL Map just because this is the most updated. I pulled the update yesterday. So this is the most updated version of SQL Map looking at an intentionally vulnerable time-based thing. The only thing that's weird about this is that the query, whatever it may be, runs 2 times. So it is a time-based SQL injection that runs twice instead of running once. So and then we're running it as attack U. Give it something that way it has the already has the vulnerable field, so we're giving it all the information in theory would need. There's other methods you can use to do SQL map with, like the request method and things like that, but for the sake of time and for the sake of this demo, we're just going to keep going with this. But if you go ahead and you run this, you can even set the level to 5 and the risk to 3. Level and 5 and risk just means that it's likely going to send more and more advanced payloads, longer payloads. These things will just kind of does more verbose checks. So if you're not running against Cloudflare, fair warning, Cloudflare will rate limit you, then you can up the level, up the risk all you want. So if you're running like a CTF instance or doing hack the box, something along those lines, up the level, up the risk, why not? We'll let this run for a couple seconds just to kind of show. I should have done hack badge, but whatever, it's fine. Basically, it's going to go through, it's going to do all the lovely, lovely things. There we go. Boolean-based, error-based. Sorry, I want you guys to see that the SQL map sleep fails, because I know that the time-based one's right here. These ones, if I can stop my terminal. There we go. So, right here, you can see that it's doing, that's stacked queries. Where was sleep? Time-based, sleep. These are the payloads it's trying to run. These aren't the full, thing. It's like sleep comment, query sleep comment. But basically, it's unable to detect that this is actually vulnerable to SQL injection. But if we come over here to this side right over here, and we do like this, I didn't write down my payload for this, so this is a little off kilter. Sleep for 5, whatever. It should, if you look at it in Burp Suite, it will not send you anything back for 10 seconds. It took some special use cases. Again, this lab was made in about 2 weeks, so fair warning, there are bugs in it. It's all open source. If you find a bug, please report it. I'll be happy to fix it. But, oh, that's what it was. I was like, I can barely see, but, oh, that's what it is. I was like, why did that not work? But, sorry, I'm looking off of this screen right here instead of turning off my shoulder, so, see that. Thank you for submission. Oh, it's because I didn't comment, that's why. But, anywho's, besides the point, I'm getting too long on this. Besides the point, this is one of these cases where it does not work. So, if we go back over to slide deck, there are multiple different kinds of SQLi. As we kind of talked about time-based, there's error-based, union-based, Boolean-based, and time-based. These all fall under like 3 general different categories, which is one being in-band, which is the most common, easy to exploit. That's when you can see the errors returned to you, so you can be like, cool, you throw in a single quote, and it's like, SQL exception, whatever, malformed query, whatever the database you're using throws. Or you can do something like a union-based one, which will throw the same thing. Boolean and time-based, those are your, Boolean is, does it equal true? Yes? Cool, you're good. Those ones are common to see, and then time-based, as we saw, that'll put the database to sleep, or something like that. And again, as I talked about a little bit earlier, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about a Microsoft SQL specific thing, which is XP Directory and XP Command Shell. XP Directory will allow you to list files off of it. These are specific functions to Microsoft SQL servers, so if you come into contact with one, it may be enabled, it may not be enabled. But Directory will let you list directories and list where files are. Command Shell will let you potentially run commands, those kind of things, depending on your user permissions. So just fair warning, again, Microsoft hates us and doesn't want us to have XP Command Shell in the development version, so I couldn't really do that. So I did make all these labs free and open source. So we're going to be going over general SQLi, general cross-site scripting. So if you'd like to follow along and you have Docker on your computer, you can go ahead and go to that lovely link right there. Just Black Lantern Security /Web App Labs on GitHub. You can download the labs and work alongside. But again, this isn't a workshop, so I'm not expecting you to do that. But these labs will be there forever. I plan on adding more of them for each different type of web app vulnerability, like command injection, that kind of stuff. So be looking out here. That'll be where all of it's posted, as well as likely on Black Lantern Security's blogs. But if you want to go ahead and follow along, just clone the Git repository, cd into it, and then cd into the Docker instance, and then just Docker compose up. Everything should work. It'll run on your local system, so you're not hurting anything. So yeah, cool. Cool. Yeah. So let's kind of talk about detecting SQL injection. I talked about it a little bit earlier, but one of the main ways is of inputting a SQL character. This can be a double quote, single quote, anything like that. And it'll commonly throw, this is the Union SQLi challenge, which we'll get to in a little bit, but it'll commonly throw you an error that says, oh yeah, you have an error in your SQL syntax or something along those lines. If it errors out, you just want to make the error go away. And that's the trick to SQL injection, is making the error go away. So you can go through and you can put single comments in all of these, fill out the fields, and you'll find which one is vulnerable. But we're going to look at a basic admin bypass now. So, let me get my other terminal back up. This one. Nope, this is not one. Cool. So back over to this. We're just going to look at a specific admin bypass right now. This is the basics. This is the first thing I ever learned when I was looking at how to do SQL injection and all those fun things. So if you come over here to the username, you'll see all my past payloads I put in this. And we just want to put admin, single quote, and then we're just going to comment out the logic. So again, you can use the pound sign or hashtag, whatever you want to call it, or you can use a double dash and then a space afterwards. And then if you try and hit login, this does require a password. You can put anything in here. And boom. So what I did for this is I went ahead and I gave you the full SQL query that is running on the back end. So this is just so then you can have more vision into what you're actually doing, because whenever I was trying to learn how to do it on labs and things like that, I wasn't able to see what the server was seeing. And so that was a big problem for me. So I was like, all right, cool, let's just make it to where it works. So we knew that there was an admin page just because of the README on there. There's like 3 test user instances. There's admin, test 1, and user 1. All of it's located on the GitHub, so you can just you can see the documentation for it there. But as you can see here, we have the actual full query that's executing, and you have username, admin, single quote, dash dash space, single quote. And so basically, it's commenting out all the password logic, so it's only looking for this admin page. It's only looking to make sure that the admin username is correct. It's not looking at any of the password logic. So that's the basics of kind of getting around a login portal. Again, this is very rudimentary examples. Odds are, something like this, if you're not in a CTF environment, will probably be blocked by Cloudflare. But if you're looking at really jank web apps, it's very easy to go back to the basics because you may be forgetting about it. But next up, we were going to look at, so this is what we're talking about with the comment bypasses. So it's just admin, single quote, dash dash, and then you get inactive. These were just in case my labs did not work day of and decided to break overnight, which I made my sacrifices to the live demo gods, so we're going to try and do everything live, but, Anyways, Boolean bypasses are just anything that equals to true. So as we kind of talked about a little bit earlier, basically we want whatever comes after the initial username to evaluate to true. So if we just give it like admin or 1 equals 1, that's obviously a true statement. SQL will then interpret that and be like, all right, cool, it's admin, or just 1 equals 1. So in that case, you may not even need the initial admin as well. So just another way you can kind of do general bypasses. Looking at union queries, we start to get a little bit more complex. As I stated before, union queries are commonly combining 2 tables or something along those lines, combining 2 tables, 2 different columns from tables to look at alongside each other. So you can kind of start to detect these with the general SQL method we talked before by just inputting single quote, double quote, see what happens, see if you can get an error returned to you. If you do, then there comes a couple more steps to crafting the payload. Whereas before, it's kind of just commenting out logic, making it all easy. Now it's looking at it and being like, all right, cool, I now need to craft a valid query 1, and then after that, see what I can do with those valid queries. So looking at it, basically, let me go through and where do my labs keep going? I feel like I've opened like 2 or 3 of them now. Okay, we're going to go here. Go back to challenges. Don't break on me. There we go. Come on. So, again, for the sake of time, because I realize I'm already halfway through here and I'm barely scratching the surface on my slides, we're going to go ahead and we're just going to do the correct payload, which is this order by. It's not case sensitive, but I case sensitive everything just because it's been ingrained in me. So I could put this all in lowercase comments to be fine. But essentially, we just want to figure out where the error happens. So the entire trick here, sorry, I'm going to go to the next slide. My trick here is to figure out how many columns there are here to build out this union select query. The more columns there are, the more complex, the more you can put in a query. But if you don't have the right amount of columns listed in your union select, the query will not run. So if you put too many, you'll get this nice unknown column 6 in order clause, and it'll show you all of them. Again, I try to give you guys as much verbose output as I could, just that way you can see it if you're a beginner. But excuse me. Looking at it, you can also just start building the query with a ton of null values, and then just see where it errors out. That's the other method to it, is you do union select, null, 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 and you just keep adding until eventually it tells you, oh, unknown column. Then you can just start injecting all these columns. So, going a little bit forward, while we were using null characters, whenever a SQL admin creates their database, they can select what kind of input they want into different columns. So you're going to have to start looking at that. While we're using null characters, and those are fine for finding the amount of columns, when you're crafting a payload, you're going to have to find ones that use characters. You're going to find strings. You're going to have to find out which ones require a number in them. So these are all the different kinds of data types. Basically, you know, an int is a number. It's looking for a 2. It's looking for a char. It's looking for quotes. So it's looking for something like a, something along those lines. They're all different kinds. They all have different use cases. We're not going through them all because that's a lot. But basically, we can find out, and we can look at testing data types on this, and we can find that numbers work, letters work. Again, for the interest of time, I wanted to go through and do like the entire thing live demo, but again, I'm 25 minutes in, and we haven't gotten to XSS yet. So, but you can find that it would display 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 right there, and then also in your payload, you can see union select 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we know that letters work, we know that the numbers work. So now we can just keep going and keep building our payload. So now I want to start actually doing database enumeration. So we want to find out a few things. We want to find out what user we're running as. So we want to see like, okay, cool. Are we running as root user by default? You know, are these queries being reached out to as root? We want to figure out the permissions that this user has, and then any version information we can find. This is just kind of basic enumeration principles, but we're going to do it all manually instead of letting SQL map do all the hard work for us. So a couple of useful functions is this user function. It's pretty rad. Also, the version function is pretty cool, but we'll talk about that. So in general, if you do union select user in parentheses, it'll actually output the username right there to you as well as your IP address. So you can see we're running as this vuln user. And then what version are we running? We can see that we're running MySQL version 5.744 by using the version function. So again, it's just exploiting versions just to try and get a little bit closer on manual injection. So we want to do permission enumeration. This gets a little bit weirder. So this is where we're going to be using one of those base databases that we talked about earlier. We're going to be looking at the information schema, as that kind of outlines what privileges users have. So for this, we have the grantee privilege type. So the grantee is going to be the vuln user. It's going to be the privilege type is going to be file. So what the file type allows you to do is allows you to upload files and read files. So, or write to files, it's afraid. Write and read is what file allows you to do. So if you ever see that you have file perms, you have money. This is immediate access to a shell, which we'll go over here in a couple seconds. So yeah, and then of course this long information schema, that user privilege is where a grantee like vuln user, it's looking for the specific user privileges for this vuln user. So you can shorten this payload a little bit if you would like to, but either way. So we want to talk about loading a file. If you just want to do a general check to see what you have access to, most of the time, whoever you're running as has access to the web directory. So if you want to just try and read the home page, read the index.php, read whatever the main page that you're looking at is. So for this, as you can see, we did union select 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the load file function, and then we just gave it the path to the file. So in Apache and in PHP instances, most of the time, files are held under this /var/www/html, and then the actual file name. So you can do something like that, and then boom, if you have the full source code for the index.php right there. And so this is automatically an info disclosure finding because you can access source code. So yeah, it's pretty neat. You can also get to reading other files as well. It just depends on what your user has access to. So if you're running as the root user, you may have access to like Etsy password or something like that, files with more, I guess, privileged information. So this alone can go a long way. But as far as uploading a shell goes, you can upload a shell using MySQL functions. In this case, I'm just uploading a generic web shell that's just shell.php. So if you want to take a look at it, we just did union select one. We're injecting into the second column right here. And that's our entire shell right there. So we're just going to be querying it from here. I'll go ahead and I'll do this bit. Just that way it makes a little more sense once you see it. So come over here to the SQLi challenge. I'll bring it down that way I can see the query I'm trying to write as well. We can do something like this. All right. So as you can see, this is the entire shell. Make sure there's space at the end of it. And this entire shell, all uploaded just fine. If we hit the search, file uploaded successfully. Sometimes you'll get this back and it'll tell you the file uploaded. Sometimes you won't. Realistically, again, for the sake of the labs, I was trying to give you guys as much information as I could. So now, if you go through and you visit 7.0.0.1 on port, whatever that is, shell.php, question mark, 0 equals who am I? You can see that you have shell execution here, and you're running as the www data user. So that's who you currently have shell privileges as. So this is the basis of building a shell. You can then put any command you want. You have RCE now. So you can put any command you want after that 0 equals. You can put yourself an actual shell. If you want to have a terminal, you can start exploring the system through here if you hate the terminal and want to use repeater only. But that's generally how far you can take it, at least manually. I wanted to do an XP command shell example as well, but Microsoft hates us, so, you know. Anyways, as you see here, you just access this little endpoint right here, the shell.php question mark 0, who am I? The reason why it's 0 is because this right here is 0. If you change this to being CMD, change it to being A, whatever you change this to, that's going to be the variable you're inputting to. So if you do question mark is how you call certain variables. So like you'll commonly see it on a lot of web apps whenever you're like, question mark export equals A or whatever. So question mark 0 equals who am I? You get back data. How do you remediate this? Input sanitization. Woo. Blacklist certain characters. Woo. We've all been told this 20 different times, so I'm not going to harp on it for a super long time. But if you're a developer, please, dear Lord, use input sanitization. Or just blacklist the single quote and double quote if you don't need it. Straightforward answer. So now we're going to talk a little bit about XSS. XSS gets a little bit more tricky when it comes down to things. I do find that you can do a lot more with an XSS, at least with like hijacking, and there's a lot more options for you. Whereas SQL, you kind of get stuck into certain, like you get stuck to what the SQL database can do. JavaScript got a lot more commands than SQL does, in my opinion. So, let me go ahead and spin up those labs. Docker, those up, cool. So for the SQL labs, first of all, starting off JavaScript functions, the basics of it. JavaScript usually runs all of its scripts inside of script tags. There are multiple different things you can do. General alerting happens in 27 different ways. You can use the basic alert, quotes, XSS, whatever. You can use image source X. The image source X, what it's going to do is it's going to go and it's going to look for an image. Basically, it's looking for an image at your source X. So if you give it an actual image here, it'll pull the image, fine, whatever. But since obviously X is not a valid URL, not a valid PNG, it's then going to go to this onError function, which is then alerted XSS. So we're going to be using that payload a lot. And you can also use different ones. Sometimes developers hate us and they want to blacklist just the word alert. So there are other ways you can do it as well. But alert's the most common. Alert's the most common we see in a lot of CTF instances, all that fun stuff. So looking at it, there's some advanced JavaScript commands you can use as well. The one we're going to be looking at a lot today is document.cookie. That's the one that you use to steal cookies to impersonate other users. So if you ever want to have access to an admin dashboard as somebody and burp or something has found that like there's a cookie there and you're like, yeah, I want the admin cookie. And you're finding that there is a place where your payload is being viewed by an admin. Like for example, if you're sending in like a complaint, the complaints usually go to the admins. So if you are able to find that there is a cross-site scripting vulnerability there, you send the admin the cross-site scripting vulnerability, whether it's encoded, whatever. The admin would then view it, and they would then send the session token back to you using certain payloads. So we'll get into that again in a couple seconds. Cross-site scripting, there are three main things, as I've stated. It's when you inject malicious JavaScript into a field. There are three main classifications: reflected, stored, and DOM-based. Getting into it, again, lab access. This one is in XSS labs directory. They're not all one container. I had to write them differently because PHP and all that fun stuff. But all spelled out the same way, all using Docker. Excuse me. Reflected XSS, this is anytime like anything you put into something is reflected back out to you. So like, for example, say you sign up for a newsletter and it prints your email back out to you saying like, thank you for signing up, insert email here. If you inject into that and it's like, okay, cool, thank you for signing up, script alert 1. That's reflected XSS. That's it going back to you. There is a difference between reflected XSS. This is what it looks like. Reflected input right here. Oh, back up. Reflected input right here, and then you just simply put script alert 1, boom, done. Cool? Cool. Stored XSS is a little different. It involves whatever your input is being stored on the page. You can commonly see this in blogs and blog comments, things like that, where there's a discussion happening, Reddit, places like that. Not saying there's cross-site scripting in Reddit. They're very, very good about their input sanitization. But comments are a good example of this. It's anything that's stored on the server side. So that also means that anytime any person views it, that payload will run. So it's persistent, whereas reflected cross-site scripting is not. You have to rerun the payload each time. So looking at an example of it, you can kind of see that this reflected input is stored here, and it's still here afterwards. Again, I have 15 minutes left, so I'm going to go through this a little quicker than I would like to, but again, besides the point. So yeah, moving forward, DOM-based. This sucks, and it's complicated, and I hate it. But basically, a vulnerability exists entirely on the server side, or entirely on the client side, excuse me. And it's whenever JavaScript processes inside of your actual browser. So it's doing something based on like, there are some like malicious JavaScript tags that you can find, like this inner HTML, get element by ID. This is basically what it is. A script reads from the URL, this document get element.id. If a user visits evilcorp hashtag script alert 1, the page renders this. So it's changing everything on the client side, so there's no actual server-side interaction. DOM XSS is weird. It's very, very funky. It's very, very specific, and there's very, very good use cases for it, and it's very common. But there's a lot of different functions for it, so I highly, highly recommend looking up the dangerous JavaScript functions that go along with it. So this is a general scenario. Again, we have all of these all mapped out, but I got like 10 minutes left, so we're running through this. General example. I have the full scenario listed there, as well as the vulnerable part or the vulnerable function that you can inject into. So I highly recommend, please go. All of these payloads are going to be on the GitHub tonight. I just haven't put them in the README just yet. So if you guys want to go and test and do all this stuff tonight, please do. So we're going to talk about cookie stealing a little bit and like session hijacking, because that's a lot of what I find are the fun parts of cross-site scripting, is trying to get access to stuff I don't have access to. So basically how you can do this is, one, you're going to need a server for your cross-site scripting payload to talk to. So this can be an HTTP server, this can be a webhook of some kind, basically anything that you have control over that can receive traffic based on HTTP. So we're going to be using the document.cookie function. This just displays the cookie that the page has loaded. So again, we're looking at it from the example of sending a payload to an admin. So for the labs, I do have a bot that will go through and it will run all your payloads for you as if it was an admin, and then return you a cookie. So if you've done this correctly, you've started up, like, the easiest way I always find to do it is by starting up your own Python server, just by using Python TAC-M, and then inputting the port number, and you put your IP address and the port into your cross-site scripting payload, $C equals document cookie, and then admin views that and gives you the admin cookie back to your HTTP server. You can see it. We'll go through that again in a couple seconds. But looking at it, basically, you start your HTTP server using that Python TAC-M. This is a lovely, lovely payload that you can use. Excuse me. So this is what it looks like when it actually does. Everything works in general. I don't know why it says 8080 there. Mind me. So we started a Python server on the port 8000. So in theory, this payload is a little wrong. I'm just noticing that. My bad. You then have basically this new image source, and you're having it be like, all right, cool, send me all of this stuff. And so it's like, send me the document cookie here. And so it'll try and load the image, quote unquote, and it'll go look at that URL. And so whenever you're looking at it, it'll just be like, all right, cool, here's the document cookie from the person who viewed it. Again, there's a bot to view all this stuff with, so it's cool. And then that's what it looks like whenever you get one back, is these tokens are admin_session, and then whatever the cookie is right here. Moving on. Filter bypassing. Rad! This is the first person who passes the filter bypassing one, I will give a challenge coin to tonight. There is one lab left, and it is filter bypassing. You have source code to it. This is what it in general looks like. I originally was going to do this live, but I don't have enough time to go through like the 30 payloads it takes to figure out all the filters that I put on this thing. This is all, the XSS is run using Flask, so by nature it runs, I believe, on port 5000. Yeah, port 5000. So here's access to all this. If you want to look at another example of like just basic filtering, this when tools fail one is the same thing. The goal is to steal the admin session cookie, but it won't take just regular stuff. You have to URL encode this payload for it to work. Again, I got like 5 minutes left here, so I'm trying to speed up a little bit. But so if you input something like, image source img source equals x on error. Hold on a second. Do something like this, and this is just that big long payload I showed you beforehand. If you do this and you try to run it, it won't work. It won't execute properly because the server side is looking for something that's URL encoded. You may have to start URL encoding your payloads, encoding them using base64, something like that, just to make sure that they actually will run on the server. So just fair warning, again, please go test this, go break this. The actual working payload for this one looks like this, which is just a URL encoded, the exact same thing, just all URL encoded, all the special characters. Now if I was to spin up a Python server, where's my second terminal? SQL map is still running. Oh, no, it's not. Clear, Hadoop Python, attack M, HTTP server.server, 8000, I believe is the port I used. 1000, nope, Python 3, my bad. Nope. What do I get for doing live demos, right? Cool. Now I started up a Python server. Now whenever I send this payload here, you can see that the payload is submitted down here. Again, this is just for the sake of you being able to view it and see what you're doing. You can then also check if you submit something else or you refresh. There'll be an updated thing here that says visited whenever the bot gets to it. Just in case, I think it's useful to know, like, okay, cool, my payload didn't work. The bot has viewed it, those kinds of things. So whenever it does view it, you can also see it if you have the Docker logs up. So at the bottom here, you'll see this get X, that 404 is. That's your payload. It's trying to get the image source X right there. And so now if we come over to that's not the right terminal for that. This is the right terminal for that. Come over here, we can see that we got the admin cookie for this one as well. So there may be some encoding that has to take place. Highly, highly recommend going for it. But yeah. Again, remediation for it. Input sanitization. Make sure you're encoding the user output if you can. Also, set your HTTP only flag. That's something on the developer end of things that will stop this from happening, period. Is if that flag is set, then you can't steal cookies. If the flag is not set, it's fair game. And also, to avoid DOM ones, avoid some of these dangerous functions is kind of what I was talking about earlier. There's more than this list, but inner HTML, document.write, eval, set timeout. These are some of the examples of dangerous functions that run naturally in JavaScript. So, look out for those if you're a developer developing something on the web. Be careful of your input if you're using those functions. Yeah, that's all I got. So if you guys have any questions, any general questions? Going once, going twice, sold? Cool. Thank you guys all so much for coming. All these labs, again, are located on BLS's GitHub. So please go look at them, go test them. I'll be adding more, hopefully within the next coming months. Also, if you want to stay connected to us, join us on Discord. So yeah, thank you guys.